An organization of residents of Princeton Borough and Township with diverse backgrounds, interests, and talents. Princeton Future has grown out of a concern that much of the planning and proposed development of the critical downtown spaces have been proceeding in an unconnected manner. The aim of Princeton Future is to assist the municipal authority to take a forward-looking and more comprehensive approach. Investigation and consultation undertaken by Princeton Future indicates that these objectives are achievable with good planning. More detailed studies and further involvement of all concerned parties are, however, clearly called for.
Contract, some kind of deal where the hospital gets more space, but then they...
I mean, the cemetery.
Yeah, I'll flip it.
Just flip it.
I remember how to do this. I did last time.
No, hit the red and the black together.
No, it's
oh, you
going
did?
around.
You got it. You did.
Just red alone.
Okay.
The Presbyterians needing money. The ones on Nassau Street don't. The Witherspoon Street one does.
Well, but see, the thing is, the kind of development for public use could be at public expense.
Yes.
And then what the Presbyterian, what the cemetery people get is more space, and then there can become some kind of nice entry development without taking the whole thing
really
apart.
nice.
And plus
walking up Franklin.
No, we usually take
plus
kids just go to
through
Haven, so we
pathway
take
sort of encourages people on it.
Couldn't the historic signage system also
the other
carry
side,
into the
not more,
Johns
but the other one.
Witherspoon
We take that up
neighborhood?
to
And
Nassau
part of the
Street
history that
Go to
Wanda
Nassau.
spoke about
and then
different
we go to Nassau
businesses
Street,
up and down the
Just come
street.
by like that.
This
and
could
back.
all be
So
tied
you
together
wouldn't-
almost in a
and
kind of
down
a
Franklin,
Street
cut it
trail,
back across
which
the
was
top.
not
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
Witherspoon
Yeah.
Street, which actually took you
But
through
we'll probably
here,
not,
then
because a lot of
across
people
and up and through
either
and back
either
out,
either
in a
walk
sort
or
of
drive.
cross
So
reading
I mean, not
to
that
the,
you need drive,
you know,
not very far,
the
but
commercial
These days.
straight through line.
Well, that is a love idea. It's a really interesting idea.
Does anyone feel that this area is appropriate for a historic preservation overlay zone? Specifically, these homes that face Witherspoon Street that, you know, may need some maintenance. Nonetheless, there's an argument to be made. They represent scale, detailing, and character from a particular time period. And how would people feel about that?
Especially if it had planning impact, like maintaining residential uses. And
Would that increase the amount of control that people have over maintaining it as a?
Possibly, because
As
then
residential.
possibly you could envision a community-based or less likely, but possibly municipal-based sort of neighborhood improvement association or group that could make loans for historic facade preservation or facade
are there
restoration.
any others in town?
Yes, Mountain Avenue has one in the township. The borough has a couple that Wanda could tell us about, I'm sure. But yes, there are a number in both the town and
Jugtown is one.
the town and the borough.
Why not explore it? I think it's
Yeah.
I think it's worth
sounds like a
looking
real
at.
possibility.
Should we move to downtown? On my notes,
Uptown.
Excuse me, uptown. Excuse me.
I thought we always have called it uptown.
Yeah.
No matter
one-
where-
one
where
last-
you've lived.
If you're in a car, you don't notice it, but if you're on
You,
foot,
but,
Oh, no, if you're
but you know
walking,
what?
it's uptown.
yeah,
No,
definitely
yeah,
uptown.
but you go uptown to downtown Princeton.
No, we've always gone uptown.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about uptown.
Uptown.
But maybe as a way of introducing it, I was saddened to read that the bus shelter for out here fell through on account of, I don't know, it seemed like incompetence, but they just couldn't figure out what they were doing. And obviously it didn't occur to anyone to make plans enough ahead of time to have this figured out. So. But I see people sitting, waiting for the bus over here in front of the Arts Council, and I see various things. Does anyone have any sense of the series of bus shelters or something that might further identify public transportation system in this area? Would that have any benefit or not?
You said that there was one supposed to be built.
Supposed to build, I think it was supposed to be right outside here.
Yeah.
And there was an article in the paper this week that said that basically they couldn't get their act together and figure out where to put it.
New Jersey Transit claimed there wasn't enough space.
Everyone's sitting around doing this, and so now they've given up on it.
Well,
Yeah,
who are
but-
they, though?
Maybe it has to be encouraged privately.
Not certain whether
like the
New Jersey
kiosk.
Transit.
Is it that
The university chipped in some money for it, and New Jersey Transit was supposed to do it, and these people were
you need a
supposed.
little roof?
You
I
know,
know,
you
I
would
know.
think it would
An
be
umbrella.
It's going. It's
Somebody could show up with
It's
a
going to
big
become
umbrella.
like it was before. The entrance to the library, which is a large, nice entrance, will end up being a spot for people to hang out. There's no place to sit though.
Well, you could,
So I don't think
Put
it's dead
seats.
because all it takes is a little creativity.
Yeah,
I think that'll happen someday. I do know that right out
If it's
here in
needed.
front of the new Arts Council
Yeah.
building, when it will happen, will be a very nice terrace to sit on.
Yes, but it won't be sheltered from the elements. It won't have any kind of roof over it.
Well, my personal opinion about shelter from the elements is that they are compact and portable these days. Nobody needs to get wet
The
outside.
university has been putting up a bunch of them.
Yeah, that one.
For
Got
their
one on
campus
William
shop.
Street.
What a concept.
Doesn't seem so bad. I mean, they're rarely.
Then it's where.
But where are,
Things of
but
beauty.
whether there's a shelter or not, where are the bus stops along this road?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Would you mark them?
There's one- there's gonna be one at the library
I'm
area.
assuming there's one here.
There was one, there will be one.
Appears to be in front of the Arts
On both sides of
Council.
the street there. Yeah.
Let me take a poll. Who's used the bus in the last year?
I'm certain the hospital.
Anybody else?
I know there's one that's like in here somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly
I
where,
think
but
people
it's
just don't
Right,
avail
right
like
here.
right.
Yeah, the where the.
I haven't.
No. It's close to the public or the housing there. It's right there or something like that. Like over there. There's one that's right there. I think.
Why would you want to go to Quaker Bridge Mall?
I don't.
I had jury duty in Trenton, I used the bus.
It just
It was
amazes
much
me.
better than,
You know,
Yeah, that's
it's a
good.
very capable bus. It
Much
says
better.
it loses money. There's only 3 or 4 people on it.
Yeah, but there's a
Work
large
somewhere
percentage of the
that you get
community,
to
the
buy.
Hispanic community that do not own
working
vehicles
there?
and they have
No,
to be able to
work
have
day
some
by day.
way
Use
of-
the bus?
Yeah.
didn't use the bus on day
I'm
by day.
promoting
Just
the
use
bus.
Oh yeah, I think that
Jury
we should encourage it.
No,
I
but
agree.
do you commute by car anywhere every day to work?
I commute by car and bike.
Car?
When the weather, when there's bad, I do,
How far do you have to go?
a mile or so.
Okay.
All right.
Just getting back to this, can I just ask one question just to start off? Are they going to change the direction of the traffic on Spring?
Yes.
To this
My
direction?
understanding.
Are they going to put a light there? Or?
Actually, my understanding is it's going to go that way one
Still
way.
does.
That's not a change.
No, it's two, it's gonna be two, become
Oh, it's
two
going to be
ways.
two
Oh,
way.
2 ways. So when you come out of the garage, you're going to be able to take a right here?
This was the agreement with the people over, when the thing was being planned, the people over in North Tulane and Van Deventer
These
were very
people,
upset. They'd have the garage, and this is a way of
Well, I
accommodating
think
some of
now
that.
that the garage is there, anybody who wants to go east should be upset, not just the people on the road, because
Agreed.
it's impossible to come out of the garage and do anything except for wind up on Nassau.
And then you have to be able to do a left turn and right turn out onto
You can
Witherspoon.
go down.
No, there
call
will
it
be no
back.
left turn.
Yeah.
No left turn.
I don't think there'll be a left turn.
No,
Yeah, that
what's
would make
Come
sense.
out, you come out on Wiggins.
North
too.
Tulane.
No, you come out on
and then
Wiggins.
You can come out here.
Yeah.
It's
That's
one
the
way.
best way
Right.
to go.
Yeah, the little internal loop, you have
No,
to
I mean-
turn right coming out of it, but
But-
over
By-
here you can
by
make
the
a
way,
left.
Kevin, we need to
No,
talk.
you
with,
can't.
we need
You
we
can't
need to
do
talk
it.
with Borough Hall because the drawings at Borough Hall showing left or right there, and there's if you look at the
At
lane
here?
markings, yes,
Coming
lane
out of
there's a left turn lane and a right turn lane, but then on the
On the fence over here, they put up a no
cemetery
left
fence,
hand.
That's the sign's not supposed to be there. And Carl Peters said it wasn't supposed to be there when I asked him.
Interesting.
So they should take that down.
Well, you
Benson building.
Yeah,
that guy.
It's a nightmare
Th-
building,
th-
isn't it?
This
Thank you, Jerry
is
Ford.
so characteristic of the
You
town.
think about the
Variety.
moments when those big, really grim buildings were built.
When this was built,
Well, after the big fire there,
1980,
was?
this
yeah,
was
a
built.
huge fire.
Yeah, fire burned.
And in
What was the
fact,
restaurant in there?
it was Hills Market, and
This was 1980, and now basic. I mean, to bring this into context, what's going on here? Basically,
talk about
well, and here too,
all of this is getting filled in.
and this.
All of this is getting filled in.
Yeah, this.
All roughly
I
at this
know,
height.
ho-
This height
hopefully-
is now going to be.
Hopefully,
carry
this
all
will
through here.
come out as good as this, but the thing that you're going to lose when this gets filled in is when you look this way, the roofs of the building in town and the variety of architecture and just the bizarre
From the
stuff
back,
you see.
you mean?
Yeah, it is just so pretty.
It's so kooky.
It's kooky. It's got
When you look, you mean when you look from the roof of the present garage?
no, when you stand
just look
here
there. Yeah.
at ground level and look up here,
Yeah.
just
At the
look up and
backs
see
of
Yeah,
all
it.
but,
the-
but wait, you'll be able to stand up here and look at that.
If you live in
You
a
know,
As I said, I hope
Look
they-
down at it.
Scott,
It'll be even more exciting.
No, they're closing that off. They're closing that off.
Yeah, I think this is getting closed, Virginia, and I'm not entirely certain what's going to happen. There's that one little landlocked building in there, and actually part of that access is owned by the guy that owns that landlocked building, the Halo Club guy. I think actually that's going to come to him, and I think the public is going to use Spring Street to get in and out of that system. I believe, I'm not certain.
Now what?
So one of the relief valves will be taken away.
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to put a lot more pressure right down here because this street only goes this way.
Yeah.
And what's coming up there?
This is going to be residential over parking garage.
No, parking garage.
I'm sorry. Parking garage is here. This is going to be residential over ground floor commercial.
Yeah.
A supermarket
Supermarket
and-
stuff. And actually, there's part of it is residential studio, like.
There are a few units that have ground floor retail or
retail.
professional office with a residential unit above it. There's
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 of those,
3, I think.
something like that in there.
So it'll be encouraging owner-occupied little retail.
And this would be three.
There's a lot of that in this
story.
community, but
Three-fourths
not down to
4 to 5 is my guess. Probably identical to
there's still
that
going to
thing.
be people who are just.
My guess is it's going to look exactly like that.
Yeah.
Same developer, same deal, same builder, my guess.
It's similar, it's close.
When you're not in a democracy, you always have to.
How about this spot right here that's parking?
Ah,
How do
Griggs.
people feel about the old Griggs garage site?
I mean,
There's an incredible number of different plans for that site.
Yes.
And the issue it always gets hung up on parking.
that corner, what is
There
it?
was.
That corner.
Which way is that?
Briggs Corner.
Griggs Corner, that's it. We're talking about Griggs Corner
That's
right
what we're
now.
talking about, Griggs Corner.
As with the
Ichi-
parking garage
Ichiban,
here and the
UPS.
library, the
Yeah,
idea of going
yeah.
underground for parking is an expensive and difficult proposition. And it turns out putting for parking for anything built there would have to be at ground level, and that makes it
It's too
really
small
hard
to
to
go
Thing
in.
open for development?
I don't know. I mean,
But it's
we can
bizarre.
speculate. Why not?
It's bizarre to put parking in this building when you have
You have this huge
when you
garage
have
here.
this.
in this.
Right.
and
Just
that.
leave it like it is.
But we don't have enough parking downtown, I keep hearing, even with all that.
Could this become an open space that
That's
has
what I
some
think it should
relationship
be.
to the open space over here?
Absolutely.
Could
Yeah.
somehow
like
this
that.
area ventilate the center of town and
Right.
create, a public square where this
Some
sort of
greens.
actually bleeds across? There's only, 25 spaces in there,
Right.
I'm guessing? 30
Yeah,
spaces
it's
in
not
the
very
lot?
big.
There's really not a lot.
But it's prime spot.
It is
That's
prime.
It's prime
Is
spot.
this all
It's like
paved
gold.
in there?
I
can't remember.
No, if you see the round planters, or there's going to be planters with
What do we need at this corner?
seasonal
Does
plants
anyone?
in it, and then there are the
I'm-
tree
I'm-
grates.
A green park, that's got
Place to-
grass.
place to
I'm
sit.
fairly certain the Palmer Square condos
I
kind of
think we
bleed
need,
right down.
Do you know what we need there? Writer's block.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure they'll give us that.
Yeah, but it's a little smaller than this.
It's all right, we'll make it work. But they're not going
What
to
if
give us
it
that
just
corner.
became a permanent space for endless experimentation?
Oh, there we go. Temporary housing, tents.
No, just, every 5 months, here comes a whole new idea.
That's
I
an
would like to
idea
see that
for
as a public
next year,
space.
maybe.
Yeah, public space would be nice because it would
a
work
lot of
well with
resources
the
should
relationship
go
with this
into a
space.
summer-long
Make it,
big
trees, kind of this.
A musical pavilion.
Well, who owns that, though?
The Griggs sisters. No, they're the heirs to the Griggs
To
Do they own this
gas
too?
station. No.
You know
Where's
who
those gas
this guy
stations?
Griggs was? He was a black entrepreneur
Yes,
who,
yes, very
whose
successful.
ancestor or the original one came as the servant of a Princeton undergraduate who was then, I don't know what the term is, given his freedom at the end of the presidency. And then he was energetic, and some local people gave him money to start up a business.
Sure. And he had variety.
And it was tremendously successful.
But that corner used to be a gas station.
Right. Oh, I remember.
So there's probably contamination issues on that paving. I think it's a brownfield. And it's also a very wet site, noticing that.
Sure.
So the parking issues, if parking is required, and I think under a building of any size, there's going to be also discussions about parking. And almost all the plans I've seen for that site tried to incorporate parking in the building somehow, at least for the people that are working in the building.
The problem is that, of course, the people who own it are going to want to make a big profit
And that's
out of
the other
whatever
problem.
it is they're going to do. That seems to me to be maybe the biggest problem.
But parcels have been purchased in this town and given to the park system and recreation and green acres. You know, we don't think of that happening downtown, but I don't know why we shouldn't think of that.
I like your idea of making, say, the half of the lot nearest, that half of the lot be open space, but then maybe closer to the other stuff, another building there to help cover the cost of the other part.
There is
Either way.
something so wonderful about what has been happening in here, and then of course this summer over here. This is like the sort of little secret heart of the town. It's,
Well, you know, there's going to be a change here because
and
there's
it's just wonderful. Why can't
something's
why
going
can't
through
that
here
concept
somewhere.
move over there?
Way up high, 20 feet above the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, the through part isn't that great?
No, you got to walk up.
That's one of the things that
You gotta
one of
walk
those
up
dirty
2
secrets.
flights.
It's really almost a barricade around this interior courtyard. You have to.
It's a complete joke.
I know.
The pass-through is up at the 3rd floor residential level.
through a plaza that's really going to only be used by the residents.
This will, and my understanding, this will become a monster iceberg that you're going to have to walk around. And actually, Susan, I think the urban garden will disappear. I think the condos actually come right into the edge of it. I believe they're going to come right to there.
There's a fire lane going through,
Yeah,
fire access.
There's a
too.
fire access to get to the back in here,
Right.
which is the subject of
How
some.
tall is it?
4 to 5 stories. The same as this stuff on this side of Hallfish.
Well, then what that says to me is that we as concerned citizens ought to push like mad to have this corner preserved.
If it's a brownfield, so you can't go down anyway. You don't want some footings and contaminated soil. You might as well just make a park out of it.
Right. Yeah.
Gee whiz, that's
Well,
such.
informed discussion to explore what happens in Berkeley or Philadelphia or
I will
Cambridge.
have to say, it will take some work, some research, so it couldn't happen immediately. You have to have someone pull the information together. We do have our new vice president for administration came from Columbia, and his role there was specifically neighborhood redevelopment issues, and he would be a good person to give perspective, certainly on Columbia's situation. But I think what you're going to find is that these universities get involved according to a very self-interest need. Philadelphia, obviously, the neighborhood around Penn had gotten so bad it was affecting the whole quality of the university. The same thing with New Haven.
Yeah.
It was affecting applicants, it was affecting recruiting of faculty and staff. It forced the universities to get involved in the downtown in a way that a Dartmouth or a Princeton or some other Ivy League universities have not been put into quite that pressure-filled situation. But that doesn't mean that there's not a role. It may not be the same role as a Yale and a Penn or even Columbia is forced to embrace. But I think it's a discussion. But it's an apples and oranges thing. You can't, every situation is very unique.
Yeah.
I know a lot about it.
There may be some lessons to be learned from others.
Right,
I think lessons to the learn and very much.
I am certainly in favor of looking into it, but I just, it's got to be looked at holistically in the context of the entire relationship between the.
Bob, we're trying
Also,
to
I
determine
think-
whether or not we have a consensus here about whether
And we're
a
supposed to
forum
be getting
or
a
perhaps a
summary.
series
Yes.
should be held regarding the relationship of the
Summary.
university to
Well, there is a
the
problem
center
with
area.
regional and holistic views. The definition of regional planning used to be that it's to do something at the scale larger is something that you haven't already solved. And I think that you have a precise question here, which is the interrelationship between the university and its surrounding streets. I mean, the Nassau Street, Palmer Square is perhaps one, but certainly this is another. And you don't have to look at everything to contemplate what might occur here and what might not. I mean, it could get worse.
Right. So it's the nature of a college street from here to Wigan.
Exactly.
I think my strongest reaction is this is all very nice and would be very helpful, but this is not the priority for the soonest. The closest horizon. This is not a priority. This is working sort of in a way pretty well. The other priorities are over there, over there, over
that's
there.
the one we're talking about.
Yes, I know. But if you put so much weight on it and you put, you have, this is an easier action plan than some other ones. That's what concerns me.
Okay. Wait.
Fine.
I want to see. So how are we going to summarize what we've talked about today?
You're going to summarize.
Help me out.
Get in bed with Princeton on this one.
Well,
and the hospital discussions,
I'm hearing Dr. Getty refer to it as a college block.
Will suddenly,
So that's one view.
Okay.
I think that's absolutely untrue. That's
absolutely
not untrue. That's not a college block.
It's a college front door, though.
The college is there, but that's just part of the downtown area.
No, he didn't say college block. He said college town.
No, he said college block, that area.
Well,
that's what he
I think what he's trying to say is that it's a...
They might stop down there.
For you.
It's nothing but part of the central business.
Well, we want a bus
New
stop
Jersey.
somewhere.
And I don't think the solution or the problem has any relationship to Princeton University.
there should be one of
If
the...
you look at the main street in Chapel Hill,
it's not a college
stores
block.
are exactly
Well,
the
wait.
same as what we have here.
Michael, that's absolutely right, and that's really the problem. Faculty and students really feel that there's nothing downtown that interests them. Now,
Excuse me?
I don't think that's, I
thought
think
you
that's
were
very
going to
broad
finish.
generalization, Bob.
could you repeat that again?
I'm
There's very
part of
little
that faculty
downtown
staff.
that interests them. The movie theater,
Hoagie Haven.
Hoagie Haven down there, movie theater, Triangle Repro,
Small
McClubbers, but there's relative.
Small World, the Record Exchange, the athletic, the sneaker store,
But,
Rouge, the
but
students
Pam,
flow
compared
into
to
Rouge.
Cambridge, England, or Harvard Square, a lot of other places, the intensity of student life is missing.
And faculty life. I tell you,
It's completely missing.
Yeah, but those examples that you
Why is
cited,
that a
Sheldon,
bad
I think are much more urban examples.
Hmm?
I think those examples that you've cited are much more urban.
Right.
Williamstown, Massachusetts.
Yeah, and I guess the question for me would be,
Williamstown's better than this.
Even if they are missing, are people going out of business at such a rate as to be concerned?
Well, the
Are they? If that's the case,
Hendricks,
then
yes.
then
Polo is coming in, and the affordable independent retailer
is only on the university and the faculty and staff there. What happens to this area? I think it needs to be much more comprehensively looked at, and I wouldn't mind having some dialogue. I don't want you to necessarily spend, the next 6 months trying to get stuff together for it, but I think it's a part of the mix. I don't think it controls the mix or
I think a
determines
dialogue
it.
would be helpful, and I'm sure that our new VP for administration would be happy to participate.
Great.
And I do have a lot of information.
Okay, let's just let that go.
So, aside from the really divisive comment, did we all agree that we wanted to see
What
a
divisive
lot
comment?
of...
I want to talk to you later.
Kevin, is your table ready, or is it still solving the problem?
Well, we will stop solving the problem.
I know for a large part of the discussion it drifted north. The movement of the table eventually made it back south in the discussion. Kevin, are you set?
Yeah.
Okay.
He needs a mic.
Sorry.
don't have to have lights on. Oh, right. We focused really in two sections. We focused first on the section of Witherspoon Street that runs from Paul Robeson and Wiggins down to Franklin, the Johns Witherspoon neighborhood. We discussed some characteristics, values, and issues of the street there, and then we turned at the end to discuss the central business district, and we sort of finally discussed the relationship between those two areas and the traffic flow at each other. A major issue for us was traffic flow on Witherspoon Street and how to modulate the existing traffic flow. We feel that it's would be a good strategy to reduce the local traffic and the through traffic on Witherspoon Street, to find a way to calm the traffic, and we don't necessarily advocate bumps and humps and dips and potholes. We actually think there's a possibility for adding some traffic lights along Witherspoon Street. We're fully cognizant that the state would flip out, but we think that if we slowed down the local traffic, reduce the speed of traffic on Witherspoon Street, it would emphasize local trips and de-emphasize people using Witherspoon Street as a through corridor, much along the lines of what's happened on Washington Road in the past 10 years, as the university has added lights, crosswalks in that section from Williams down to the gym. They've really lowered the speed on Washington Road and made it safer for the students to cross Washington Road. We think something similar could be done in this neighborhood on Witherspoon Street. Specifically, we identified two intersections. We think Clay and McLean both might benefit from traffic lights. We're very concerned about the development, the number of housing units being added in downtown. We came up with about 175 roughly, and the impact of that traffic heading out Witherspoon Street, further clogging the streets in the Johns Witherspoon neighborhood. We would like to see a strategy that prevents that from happening in the 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road when all of the downtown and the Palmer Square units are completed. Not only do we want to slow down the traffic, we'd like to improve the sidewalks, curbs. We discussed a couple different strategies with no clear recommendation on narrowing Witherspoon Street. We discussed, again, changing Witherspoon to one direction, south or north. We discussed the pros and cons of that. They're pretty radical. We believe the impact would be great for the local neighborhood, but it would be tough for the adjacent streets where the traffic is chased. We actually feel there are a couple critical points that are off of Witherspoon, the intersection of Johns and Robeson, the north side of John as it passes through Birch and Lee and Birch. And conversely, on the flip side, on the east, on the cemetery, there's a series of impacted blocks there that really trap traffic in this neighborhood and don't give us sufficient outlets. Barring cutting a bunch of new streets through, which we realize is unreasonable, we think we have to take an aggressive strategy to slow down the traffic in the neighborhood. We feel that of the three sections that we've discussed, this neighborhood has the most intact physical, architectural, building character. We think that should be preserved. We discussed the possibility of there maybe being a historic preservation overlay zone on this section of Witherspoon Street. We feel that many of the buildings in this neighborhood are in need of maintenance and repair, and many of them are wonderful historic homes that should be saved and preserved, and we think possibly a historic preservation district is the way to approach that. We talked about bicycles. We'd like to find a way to accommodate more friendly bicycle pathway. And we also talked about the presence of the cemetery on Witherspoon Street. Trying not to make a pun, we want to enliven the cemetery a bit and bring it into the fabric of the neighborhood and the fabric of the town. We thought that it was not fully realized as a potential park space, and I mean a passive park, a place where neighborhood residents can stroll, can walk. Possibly the notion of a bike pathway could be woven through the existing fabric of the cemetery. Possibly we could offer some additional space on Franklin for the cemetery to expand in exchange for their improving Witherspoon and Wiggins access and conceiving the cemetery as a piece of the public and social fabric of the neighborhood as opposed to an isolated island zone in that particular area. We'd like to see it, we'd like to see the edges of the cemetery opened and knit into the fabric of the neighborhood. We'd like to see the lighting improved along that section of Witherspoon Street for nighttime. We'd like to see a more consistent system for identifying bus stops. There was some discussion at our table whether bus shelters are actually needed. Nonetheless, there should be benches, signage, lighting to make the system of public transportation more legible in the public realm. Downtown, uptown, I'm constantly corrected over here. Uptown, we talked about the Central Business District a fair amount, and the one site that we're kind of interested in is the site across the street from us, the old Griggs gasoline station site, and we actually feel that that parking lot should be turned into open space for the borough that has some sort of correlation or connection to this space that's being created right outside these doors. If open space is unreasonable, then maybe it would be a mixed-use space, partially commercial, partially open space. With the addition of the new garages, we're not convinced that that piece of surface parking gains us that much, and we would like to see some additional beauty in terms of a park of some sort added to downtown. We thought that was a good opportunity.
Can I just get clarification? When you were reading off your suggestions, I guess I was getting them mixed in. Some are street, some are property specific, and some seem to refer to the central area.
Yes, most of them are about the street. The property-specific recommendations would be, in addition to the historic preservation overlay zone, we believe that possibly there could be a community-based, that would be my first choice, or our second choice might be a municipal-based neighborhood facade improvement loan program of some sort that would allow residents in the neighborhood to somehow get funding to improve their existing building in the historic neighborhood. Somehow, maybe there's some loan assistance program was a scheme for that. And really the other suggestions about downtown had to do with the site across the street. We also, in our master planning of new traffic lights, felt that we should add one at Wiggins and Van Deventer to control traffic flow there.
Okay, thank you.
Something completely different. I don't even think we thought about traffic. We were so busy thinking about other things. The way we started was we talked about whether the downtown, well, first of all, we redefined what we thought the boundary of our discussion was. And we asked ourselves the question, should the central business district stay south of Paul Robeson, or should it pull up along or down along Witherspoon Street? And everyone agreed that the character of Witherspoon Street should change remarkably at Paul Robeson, Wiggins, and that the character of the neighborhood should be intentionally maintained, and the residences should be intentionally maintained along Witherspoon, and that would include some kind of restoration and attention to the building fabric that we haven't seen with the infill yet, where the homes are maintained and the uses, residential usage is maintained too. And I think that affected how we were thinking about the downtown, because when we jumped to the infill corner at
we, as a group, came to the conclusion that with the exception of the commercial on the ground floor, we really wanted to have residential there. And we talked about it as being the little minnow next to the big fish, which would be the Palmer Square development that's now going into conceptual review in January, and how that thing modifies will have an effect on that corner site as well. And our discussion of residential usage of the corner was also strongly in favor of an African American presence there. We talked about whether there should be a higher affordable housing mixture there, and we came to the conclusion that no, it should be the same as everywhere else, but if it were possible to somehow encourage African American owned businesses at that site, that would be an appropriate use for the site, and that the family that owns the site, the Griggs, had already done this kind of development at Griggs Farm, and perhaps something could actually be realized there in terms of doing the right thing. And then we focused a lot on the bus stop at the library, which apparently last week at Borough Council they denied that there should be a bus shelter at the square. And there is a lot of concern here that there should be a bus shelter somewhere. And we also got into a big discussion about if Princeton is a university town, how much should the university have a role in helping to shape the future development. And it was thought that maybe a study of other university towns and how the university affected the development of those towns, not just in terms of molding the development, but also what happened. And not so much that we would necessarily follow how other, say, Harvard or Yale or UPenn interacted with the town, but that it would be a good learning experience in terms of examples of how a town and university work together. And there was no consensus whatsoever on this. But it was fairly interesting discussion. Everyone was interested to make comments on it. And one of the most powerful questions is how big is the role of the university in the town? Anyway, do the little stores depend on the students for survival? And there was no consensus on that, but it was a good question. And forgetting one thing. Do you want to ask some stuff?
I gave my list.
Do we have some more comments coming from that table? Chuck, but there was something left out on moving?
No, they seem
All right.
happy.
Well, Holly, let me.
Okay, then Michael, you're next.
I guess I would say that although there was no consensus about whether there should be a greater role on the part of the university, whether or not the university is served properly by the community or the students are served properly by the community, I think it was determined that there should be further discussion about the relationship of the university to a college street. And so there was the discussion of Nassau Street down to Spring Street, maybe even as far as Paul Robeson.
Witherspoon Street down too.
I'm sorry.
Witherspoon.
Yeah.
We said Nassau.
I'm sorry, Witherspoon Street. From Nassau down to Paul Robeson, and whether or not that should be perceived as a college street and should more adequately perhaps serve the student body. But regardless of which way that might go, I think there was a consensus that, and I think that there was some indication that Pam might be willing, and the university conceivably might be willing to investigate this question about what the analogs are, what the other examples are at other universities, where we might determine the various ways in which universities participate, contribute to the greater good of the community. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they would introduce new facilities along this college street, but rather that they would be regarded and should regard themselves as stakeholders who have a vested interest in the outcome of what occurs on Witherspoon Street. And therefore, through the examination of these other examples, we might determine best, and the university might determine best, how they could better participate.
Well, hi. Our group focused on the region of Witherspoon between Wiggins and Franklin, actually. And our overwhelming thought was that the scale of this neighborhood should be maintained with single-family homes and maybe duplexes as there are now, and neighborhood retail, and that effort should be made to not increase the density of the region, and also not to increase the commercial use in the region. So in particular, we noticed, it was commented that this area is the most densely populated part of Princeton, and just being realistic, there has to be a most densely populated part of Princeton, so it's probably going to it's probably going to continue to be that way, but we'd rather not see the density increase. In particular, a danger that was noted is that there are lots of lots off of Witherspoon Street. Is that direction east? That direction. West. West of Witherspoon Street, where there's the potential for someone to come in and buy up lots of lots and consolidate them and put condos on them, and that would not be good for the maintaining the scale of the neighborhood. Another point that we discussed was that it would be useful for maintaining the uniformity along Witherspoon Street if the township also had a fixed ratio for business and residential mix. I guess the borough ratio is 60-40 residential business, and there's not a similar ratio constrained on down Witherspoon. Let's see. It was noted that there is no maintenance ordinance requiring people to keep buildings up in either the township or borough, and that is an interesting fact. And we noticed, we had a lot of discussion about the fact that a certain number of the apparently single-family houses in this region are serving as rooming houses, more or less, and we certainly did not come to any conclusions about how that could be dealt with. We talked briefly about the fact that it would be nice if all the sidewalks were smooth and level and far away from the street, and we came to the understanding that that's in the plans for the borough when they reconstruct the street, which will happen in a few years' time. We were strongly against the idea that Witherspoon should be made one way, since that would just put pressure onto other parallel streets. We are also interested in the possibility of increasing the amount of green space in this region, and it was discussed that that as the cemetery continues putting in new lots and trees die, eventually that cemetery may not keep its green nature, and so one should be keeping that in mind when thinking about the need for green spaces along in here in Witherspoon. And then, let's see, the last thing that I recall that we discussed is the understanding that our desire that the commercial aspects of this part of town being capped small in scale so that they have more of a neighborhood retail feeling is, it's not obvious that it's directly addressed by there's not an obvious way that you could change the zoning to address this concern, and then it has to be kind of a multi-pronged approach to keep the nature of the community the same here. That's all I collected notes on.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that last point? I didn't follow.
Well, it appeared to me, at least, or from our discussions, that there's not a specific change that one could say would be the right change for the zoning. that would affect, that would make the goals that we came up with of trying to keep the commercial aspect neighborhoody. That you can't just turn you can't go to the zoning rules and say, oh, instead this should be zoned as no condos. Or
okay, and then I have a question. At any point, are you reporting on discussions that pertain to the CBD, or are these all central area discussion points?
Yeah, they were all from Wiggins back.
Okay, the assignment was Wiggins South. So what is happening here? Did you not have a discussion about the commercial business district?
Not much.
No. The only thing we talked about was the parking lot.
The Griggs parking lot thing. That's the only thing we discussed.
Okay,
And
apparently I did not get what you said about the Griggs being
It's likely to be developed by the owner.
Right. Oh, that's all you said?
It's going to be
Okay.
developed.
We didn't touch it.
Oh, it's likely to be developed by the owner.
Can I say something?
Okay.
One comment?
Well.
Ken?
Exactly. This is very interesting because we didn't have a chance to do this last Saturday. Really, it was last minute, and we've only got about 2 more minutes. But each table seemed to take a different approach to almost every item on the list, on the many lists.
That's good.
And that's interesting. Now, you know, what we will be doing is coming back together on January 15th to discuss all that was said, not as single tables, but one group. Sheldon, are you wanting to add?
I just had one. Laid out the wonderful drawings that Michael Mosteller has done of the 2 churches on Witherspoon Street. And what you see in the illustrations, at least what I first saw, is a tranquility and a simplicity of this neighborhood. And I think those of us who've spent a lot of time in conversation with the neighborhood understand the importance of these 2 structures. And the thing that has not come out at any of the tables today is the absolutely awful impact of the utility lines. And if you did talk about it, okay. And if these were actual drawings, and you can see them in Michael's pictures up on the wall, you would see that it is completely covered. And how a community persuades the utility company and comes up with a dough to bury utility lines is a huge, huge, complicated question. But it would completely transform that. And Michael has captured that, and I just wanted to thank Michael for doing it. And it's quite remarkable.
It's up there, and think, you know, even that commercial area would look so much better if the lines were buried. But it's something that America seems to have accepted, to my amazement.
Well, the existing technologies, they lead even the power companies to go in a different direction. The problem is where they're interested in making the investment and how those investments are made, whether jointly or singularly.
And why people don't complain more about it.
Yes, Alan?
It's also true that one of the major obstacles to undergrounding is digging the place where to put them. And if you're reconstructing a road, you have one of the best opportunities you'll ever get for any undergrounding project. So if anybody's serious about that, and Witherspoon is seriously under consideration for major reconstruction, this is the time.
Exactly.
Can I just throw in one other thing from our... One was the Merwick site, because, you know, the hospital, obviously, it's kind of, you can't really separate it, but there was an idea that if the hospital site did change, then the Merwick site could be a location for, you know, some housing development, but it could also provide a park area that would back up to both the John Witherspoon neighborhood and the new Merwick site. And then we also talked about another green space maybe being something kind of like the writer's block type of idea happening you know, somewhere on this corridor. Maybe it happens at the hospital site, since that is probably a site that might change. But something that's more in the public view and you know, really interacts with the pedestrians on the street. And the last thing I just want to mention, because it occurred to me when Kevin was talking, was there's a program that I participated in as a young person when I lived in St. Louis, and I was mentioning to Mildred, and she said, oh, you know, we have this loan fund for people to fix up their houses. And so I think that we need to be somewhat creative, and what I participated in I thought was really creative, and it was a program that provided jobs to youth during the summer. They went through a 2-week training program, and there was someone who was versed in construction, and all we did was fix up exteriors of homes. So it was a lot of painting, porch repair or porch building. We certainly have enough architects in town to help with preparing pro bono a little porch plan, and that sort of thing. And so what happened was it provided jobs for youth during the summer, and it was also a lot more affordable because you're not going to pay a young person who's sort of an apprentice you're not going to pay them top dollar, right? And then you're going to, you know, maximize your bang for the buck, and ended up improving lots of residences all over our town, and gave jobs to youth. So I think that's a terrific idea, and I think that's, you know, there are all kinds of little projects that could happen up and down Witherspoon.
Let me just make a comment about traffic. One of the problems with traffic that is stopped at traffic lights is that it's still polluting. And automobiles idling and automobiles starting from rest reduce air quality very significantly. Instead of putting a lot of traffic lights, what you want is a lot of radar traps or something. Pennington has managed to do this, and it works very well there. Everyone goes down to the posted speed limit there. And the ideal for traffic is to keep it moving at whatever speed you want it to. It's less air polluting, it gets it out of the way faster. And if you choose your speed limit properly, it's achieving a pedestrian safety thing. The worst thing is to stop them, have them idle, start off, stop them, have them idle, and so on. So if you put traffic lights up, at least synchronize them for a proper flow. The Germans do this. They tell you the speed you've got to go to get to the next one at the right time so that it will be green. It shouldn't be beyond American technology or American ingenuity to mimic that sort of
preferential signaling. If it doesn't create an absolute red light, it can, as it has at the university, at the Berlin Theater, slow you down to consciously look for pedestrians so that you're not racing around the corner. So there are...
because everybody is probably busy, I think we should try to draw this to a close. Bob, do you want to sum up? A very brief comment.
I just want to reinforce the function of this table and really to cover what appears in the newspapers incorrectly about the notion of a T. What we believe strongly here was that the downtown stopped at Wiggins and Paul Robeson Place, and the character changes, and that's profoundly social. It is not just visual, it is a profoundly social view. At the same time, we thought that in terms of the social life of the town, that perhaps this part of the downtown should relate better to the university than it does now. So both of them were social indicators, and not having to do with the Dina T at all. It is in fact to look at the character of the Witherspoon corridor in its own right.
And I guess one thing I would add quickly is that at our table, at the intersection of Witherspoon and Hullfish, it was felt very strongly that the owners of that property should be, they should be encouraged to develop it as commercial retail on the ground floor, residential above with a strong component of affordable, which Holly mentioned, but that we also have strong consensus there should not be, contrary to the other table, I think, a public park there. And furthermore, and I think even more, well, equally important, there should not be an office building there.
Okay, our next meeting, we'll try to report back and have another discussion about everything that we've covered in the separate sessions. So that is
January 15th.
January 15th in this room. Thank you all for
Thank you.
coming.
Have a nice
and
holiday.
Have a nice holiday.